You know, one of the tragedies of some of these reboots, I've been talking a lot about Masters Revelation, but, you know, other IPs that have been messed with, like the new Snake Eyes movie. Just the terrible decisions about the stories to tell and the direction to go. Decisions that don't honor at all what made those IPs great. Can you imagine how successful it would have been with old school fans and probably with a lot of new people who wanted to jump on board if they had taken that that animation? Because I thought the animation for Revelation was the company, what they did, Castlevania. It's a good animation company, and the colors popped, and you know, the muscles were a little exaggerated even on He-Man, but it did have kind of that 2002 feel from that cartoon, and that would have been a great continuation if they'd done that. So if they just kept going with that storyline, that's one thing they could have done, because 2002 ended with the Horde was about to come in. We were about to see She-Ra, and we're getting all this backstory from King Grayskull and all this. So they could have just picked up where that left off. Fans would have loved it. New folks would have been able to go back and watch 2002 and then just continue on. That would have been tremendously successful for the franchise. Somebody said, I read somewhere, and I thought it was a great idea, you know, the forces of evil and the forces of good could have united against a common threat, some kind of threat from outside, from space coming in. That's what I think they should have done with Star Wars, was, you know, continue the story. Don't resurrect the Empire. And you got to have, I think the marketing was like, you got to have TIE fighters, you got to have stormtroopers. So and they never explained really where the First Order came from, or how they had so much stuff, or why they were so powerful. And the Emperor had all this fleet, sitting underwater on some planet, and of a storyline they didn't plan out, they didn't think through. They're just spitballing it and throwing crap at the wall and seeing if anything would take. That's how they handled Star Wars. Good job, Kathleen Kennedy, Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams, and all the doofuses that blew that. But that's just kind of the same thing here. Like, if you had taken the Yuuzhan Vong from the expanded universe, or Black Sun with Kizor and all those cool characters that had already been established, already been written amongst, you know, quite a few of the fandom who reads the books, keeps up with it and all. People would have loved that. You know, Luke's built up a Jedi Order, and they've got to face a new threat, right? And you don't denigrate our heroes from the original trilogy. You show them as being successful for the evil they defeated in the Empire, and then you give them a newer, bigger challenge to face. That was why the Rocky movies were successful. You know, it's bad enough he had to get through Apollo Creed, and then he's got to face Mr. T, and then he's got to face a steroid junkie Russian. You know, and he just kept going up to that next level, and you couldn't wait to see, you know, how's Rocky going to beat this guy? And that's what they should have done, you know, present He-Man and even Skeletor with a threat. They could have brought the Horde in. The Horde is the threat, you know, just invading Eternia, and Skeletor's got this sordid past with Hordak, and, you know, the Masters show up and awesome. And it could have been mostly action, mostly battle, with some, you know, character development and themes behind there. Fans would have loved that. You know, the quasi-lesbianism is annoying, simply because it was already kind of established in the original canon that there was a love interest or a romantic interest between Adam and Teela. They could have done something with that while telling an awesome story. It's just so many better things they could have done. When you take control of these IPs, pay attention to the lore that made them what they are. Snake Eyes was a military veteran. He was an American, which is what made his story interesting, because he ended up in Japan training to be a ninja. He was like an adopted son of the Arashikage clan, and that's why Storm Shadow resented him, and they had this brotherly angst, but eventually, you know, came to terms. Tell that story. And include the G.I. Joe team in it, because they were an integral part of it. Include characters like Stalker, who was with him, you know, back in Nam. Tell the story from the 80s. I thought Bumblebee was great, because they went back to the 80s and they told a Transformers story in the 80s, which is what made it great. And they were true to a lot of the looks and a lot of the characters in that film. And it was much more well-received, I think, than the Michael Bay junk that really didn't... at some level they did, but really didn't pay homage to what made Transformers great. And they should have had the looks down. It should have looked like, you know, advanced versions of what we grew up with watching as kids. So just all that to say that, you know, when they get in these writing rooms and they start reinventing the wheel and saying, well, we got to make this for today's people, it always fails. It always fails because, hey, we're not dead yet. Those of us guys who are in our 40s, we're still around, and there's still a bunch of us, and we will still champion great IPs with great stories and great products, and word of mouth will go out from us when we like something and we feel like it honored what came before and when it's good. And the bottom line for all of this is when you watch Masters Revelation, when you watch Snake Eyes, golly, there's so many properties that have been, the new Ghostbusters, the all-female Ghostbusters was garbage. The new She-Ra was garbage. And not because they tried to make it female-centric, not even because they tried to go in a different direction with it, but because it wasn't good. There's so many different stories they could have told. You know, going back to the 80s, Ghostbusters 2 was okay. I'm sure there's big fans of that. But they had that awesome cartoon, The Real Ghostbusters, and incredible storylines like with the Boogeyman and Sam Hain. And I was really hoping when I went to the theater as a kid or as a teenager, they would have told one of those stories using the Ghostbusters cast, kind of connecting the cartoon to the movie universe. And they didn't. They told, you know, Vigo Carpathian or whatever. And it was fine, but it wasn't nearly as good as it could have been. Tell rich, exciting, new, innovative, creative stories with new characters that definitely can be based on comic books that have been written and books that have been written and lore. You know, Kathleen Kennedy said of Star Wars, we don't have anything to go on. You know, we're just, you know, having to be completely originally creative, completely dismissed all the comics, all the books, all the media, all the video games that had basically supplied the Star Wars gap for, what was it, a course of like 20, 30 years. Which was ridiculous for her to say. She's supposed to know. Creators, people who are in charge, people making these decisions, do your dad-blame market research. Know your fan base. Know the storylines that are beloved and translate those to film in an epic and successful way, and your properties will be successful. Stop sitting down in writer's room putting political and social agendas before story. And use your common sense. The reason I don't understand all this is because making money, being successful, having good word of mouth, looking good in the eyes of the fan base. I know you can't please everybody, but you can please 80–90% of your fan base if your storytelling is good and if you handle these properties with respect. And that is just completely ignored for the sake of agenda, trying to appease a few. Listen, the populations that you're trying to appeal to, they don't buy these things. They don't support these things financially. They'll scream and cry and whine about it all day on Twitter or wherever they get on, but they are not going to back you financially. So find out who is your target demographic, who is going to get behind it financially, who is going to spread the most effective, positive word of mouth, and if something's good, it will be successful. If it's garbage, it's going to create all kinds of angst and, you know, negativity, and ultimately you're going to lose money over it. Anyway, that's my rant for this morning. I hope you guys have an awesome day on this beginning Monday of the week, and good journey.